Welcome to Mind Your Mind. I am Roxana Barra Sepulveda, your host. In this podcast, we explore the importance of self care and work life balance for anyone working in the front line. As a psychotherapist and clinical supervisor, over the years, I have seen firsthand the impact of demanding jobs on a personal and professional level. I will be sharing my years of experience and expert insights to help first responders, care and health professionals, charity and higher educational frontline workers thrive in their careers rather than burnout. During each episode, I will be talking with friends and colleagues who are experts in their field to further understand the potential impact of working with survivors of trauma and will share tips and loads of useful information to help you to develop your own personally meaningful strategy to maintain your resilience and optimal well-being while supporting others that are suffering. Join me as we create a chain of support and resilience where taking care of yourself is just as important as taking care of others. Remember, selfish is kind.
We have field work from the very beginning.
Good morning. If you want to enhance your practice, avoid secondary traumatization and burnout, stories of trauma, emotional or physical.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mind Your Mind. Today, we are with Tracy Stone. She is a clinical hypnotherapist, advanced RTT therapist, executive trainer, transformational coach, international best-selling author, podcast host, and inspirational speaker based here in the UK, in Berkshire. Tracy has spent more than 30 years in some of the world's largest and most prestigious global businesses, helping senior management teams maximize their strengths and eliminate major process, engagement, and cultural issues. From New York to Sydney, she built a phenomenal reputation as a world-class problem solver and transformation whisperer. Her many awards are testaments to her ability to make concrete and significant changes to the thousands who have joined her much acclaimed workshops, training, and coaching events. Tracy has taken those years of experience in identifying the true root cause of problems and uncovering solutions that provide brilliant results, and now uses her finely tuned skills to make spectacular and lasting transformational shifts in her clients' personal lives, careers, and businesses through her unrivaled courses, coaching, and highly personalized one-to-one or focus group hypnotherapy. In 2020 and 2021, Tracy became an international best-selling author with the uplifting and inspirational anthology books Ignite Happiness and Ignite Possibilities. What a wonderful names. In October 2020, she published her international best-selling first solo book, Love Remains, A Guide Through Grief. Thank you so much for being here with me today, Tracy. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Roxana. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's quite humbling hearing back a bit about your life like that, isn't it?
Yes.
So thank you for that.
Yes, and to get also to understand your journey and what is bringing us together today, that we will be talking about grief. And mostly, I think it will be great to understand what motivates you to write this book that you have now out.
Well, thank you for that. That's a great starting point for this. So I actually had planned to write a totally different book at the time that I wrote it. It was not what I had planned to write at all. It hadn't even crossed my mind to write a book about grief. So I was going to originally write a book that was very closely aligned to the kind of work I do, clinical hypnotherapy, helping people to overcome whatever is holding them back, and that kind of an approach. And it is very much like that as well, but I completely changed the direction because I went through a very intense grieving process.
Mhm.
2.5 years ago, my darling father, my dad, who I called HGLD, which was short for handsome, godlike dad, and it was
Mhm.
just a little funny joke between us. My poor dad passed away, and he was 79, and he was a wonderful man, incredible man. He passed away from dementia and a number of complications resulting from dementia. And it was an incredible journey, both the loss of him and the actual grieving process. And I saw how intricate this was. It's really a finely woven tapestry,
Mm.
and everybody goes through it in their own way. And I saw that with what I felt going through the kind of the journey of losing him to dementia,
Mhm.
and that journey of coping with that loss, and then seeing how it affected my mum. My mum had been with my dad for 56 years. They'd been
Mhm.
married for 54 years.
Mm.
And that's an incredible loss, to have somebody who was absolutely your core, your center of your life for almost all of your life. So it affected her so differently. I saw how it affected my sister differently. I saw how it affected my niece differently. And then I talked to a number of other people, and they all said, oh my God, yes, people don't understand this until they go through it. So as I
Absolutely.
navigated that journey, I realized it's so different for everybody. And I saw how much of the work I do with people, the techniques I use, were so helpful. And I thought people need help with this. But very often, a lot of the books out there are very much story-based, which are lovely.
Mhm.
But they're sharing somebody's very personal experience. And then it's up to you as the reader to find your lessons from that, to find little gems, little nuggets that are going to help you. And sometimes it's not that easy to pull out something tangible. So I wanted to do a book that was going to share my personal experience of grief, the personal experience of a few other people. So we had like a 360-degree view of grief in our family. My perspective,
Yes.
sisters, my niece, at the next generation down, my mother, and to be able to share those different aspects, and then the experience of other people. And as well as that, to be able to share some of the technicality of grief, how and why we go through grief in a very particular way, how and why it's individual for us, how the hormones and neurotransmitters actually affect the way we grieve, and how it's there to actually help us. And also to be able to provide people with very, very tangible ways that help them to navigate this very difficult journey. So in the book, I wanted to give tools and templates and something in the book, so you don't just read it and go away and think, oh, well, that was all very nice, but now I'm moving on to something else.
Now what? Yes.
Exactly. There's something in there that you actually take your own journey, and this helps you.
And I think one of the aspects that touched me personally when I was reading the book was very much the importance that you are giving to recognizing the uniqueness of grief, no? And how much we sometimes lose sight of this process as something that we really need to kind of work through sometimes. And I found extremely useful all the tips and activities that you propose in the book, that we will share a few today for our audience. But I also want to recognize the fact that we all have had some level of loss and grief, and lately, after particularly the pandemic and constantly, frontline workers as well are exposed to loss, not only by losing their loved ones, but also the loss of patients sometimes and people around them, the loss of health and other kind of losses as well. And in that process, I think it's inevitable to experience some element of grief. And I think what I wanted to start with as well, if you can tell me a little bit more about that uniqueness of grief. What did you discover from it?
Yeah, Do you know, everybody does say it's unique, but I think very often we say it and we don't know what we mean by it. It's almost like we are diminishing the actual impact of it. It's so quick and easy to say until you go through it. And in my own experience, so a few years previously, gosh, it might have, I'm not sure how many years now, maybe 5 or 6 years previously, I lost my grandmother. And she was my only surviving grandparent. And gosh, she's just iconic in our family. The whole family would gather around her. You know, she baked, she cooked. When her husband passed, when my grandfather passed, she was in her mid-60s, I think. She then took up woodwork. She built a shed in her garden and would go out there and do woodwork as a little tiny old granny. And she took up painting in her 70s or 80s. She was an incredible woman, very iconic. So when she passed, I thought I was really grieving. And it was then that when I knew my poor dad was going, that there was no turning back. There was nothing more could be done. We knew it was coming. And I thought, it's okay. I know how to do this. I know how this will feel. I did not know how this would feel. It was so entirely different. Now, people might say, well, Tracy, of course, that's your father. Of course, it's going to be different. It is entirely different every single time. And it comes back to something that David Kessler, the very famous author who has done so much research into grief, he has said, as many people will have quoted, that grief is as unique as fingerprints. For me, I talk also in the book saying it's as unique as a snowflake. Totally unique every single time. Not even just to you as a person that your way of doing grief is different to somebody else's. Every time you feel it, it is going to be different. But what I've also found affects the unique nature of grief is culture. So the culture of where we live, it can be the kind of the country culture, it can be the culture about religion, it can be the culture of your region, of your family, of your peer group, but culture affects us, and it ends up often making the grieving person feel that their life has been shattered, completely shattered, and that alienates us. And that alienation is something that makes us feel entirely set out from the tribe, and we as human beings are tribal people.
Yes.
All through evolution.
We need others.
We need others because particularly way back thousands of years ago, it was certain death if you were alienated from the tribe. And in fact, that was used as a way of punishment many, many years ago. Well, up to as recently as the last century, that was punishment. And even today, it's still punishment because we send people to prison, to jail. And that's alienation. That alienation takes us into a place where we feel so unique and so different from other people that we don't connect. And connection is so vital to our survival. So culture can really make us feel isolated so many times by the way it is expected that we would respond. In some cultures, people will have to bury their loved one within 24 hours or by sundown. In other cultures, for me, being a Catholic, being Irish, our tradition is on the third day. And that was an incredibly fast 3 days. My dad passed on a Friday afternoon, and the Monday morning, we were off for the funeral. And it was an incredibly fast process. All of these angles, all of these aspects make it feel incredibly unique. And on top of that is that we as individuals are unique. So my lens on it, my belief systems, my experience of life all contributes to how it's different for me. Now, my sister and I are incredibly close. She is my soulmate. And we are absolutely best friends. Yes, we fight sometimes because we're sisters.
That's natural, yes.
Natural. But despite that, as close as we are, we know each other inside out. Despite that, we felt very differently through our grieving process.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because this is also making me think about the classic 5 stages of grief, no? And I wonder, and even through these theoretical perspectives, we try to make sense of something that is very different and very malleable, and everything, it depends on where you are in life, in where you are in terms of your context, how you will be going through this process. What is your intake in terms of the 5 stages of grief? And there is an element as well in terms of how do we function and how our brain is functioning during this process too.
You're so right. So the 5 stages of grief, they're very much a generalization. But while they're a generalization, you'll find when you look at them, yes, I can track my journey. Now, they don't, for me, in my understanding and my experience of it and the research that I've done into the 5 stages of grief, which really were coined by the wonderful Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Her writing is incredible on grief, of course. But these 5 stages that's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. These 5 stages are not just a very clean cycle that we go through.
No, and not they don't go one after the other in succession, right? In order, let's say.
Some people are going to start at anger. Some people are going to start at denial. Some people will start with bargaining. But generally, you'll find when you track your journey, and you can only really see this later on, that you have gone through, if not all 5 stages to some degree, you'll have gone through them to a tiny degree or a big degree. But you won't necessarily have done them in the same order as somebody else. And you might have spent a tiny amount of time in one part and a lot of time in another part. It is extremely different for everybody how this is applied. And again, that can come down dramatically to culture. It can come down to how we have to show up in the world because we have to keep moving on.
Yes.
And we might have to get up after a few days after our loss or a week after our loss and get back into work. And all of those kind of things affect how we kind of dip in and out of those 5 stages. So while they are a generalization, I can absolutely see how I have partaken in each of those areas. But for some people, they also find that when they're aware of the 5 stages of loss, they think, oh, I should be spending longer. I'm not angry enough, or I haven't bargained. Why have I not bargained? Why am I not feeling the denial? And then you kind of expect that you should be doing more grieving. You should expect that you feel more of those things. So it's really not something that should dictate how we experience grief. It's more an assessment of the experience of grief. It shouldn't make us feel guilty about not doing it right.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost as just a tool for you to understand where are you at, maybe, or what is this emotion that you're experiencing this day may be related to, because it is also an element of what was our relationship with the person that has passed, no? And that will also impact.
Huge impact. But what I find the model does is it helps us to understand why we feel the way we feel. Now, when we lost Dad, at first, while I knew that it already had hit me, I knew it hadn't hit me the way I was expecting it to yet, because we were still trying to make everything work for my mum. My sister and I were working really hard to get Mum back up on her feet, starting to deal with the funeral. First of all, she wasn't able for that. So we threw ourselves into action. And we became very much preoccupied with the action of getting the funeral up and going. And then it's dealing with all the aftermath at home, having to deal with all of my dad's things because Mum wasn't able to do that, having to help her deal with all of her paperwork, because there's a huge amount of change in your paperwork when it's that kind of a loss that affects you legally as an individual. So we were very, very busy. And it was only when I came back home to England, quite some time after Dad's loss, that we knew Mum was up and running and could cope, just about cope. We came back to England, and it was only then that it really hit me like a wall. And these stages of grief helped me to understand that it was okay that I kind of delayed the start of this. And it was okay that I was maybe spending a huge amount of time in the denial bit at first, or that I was spending longer maybe in the depression bit before I could get to the acceptance. And sometimes you will go back a stage until you know you've completed that journey for you. And all of this is then underpinned, as you rightly said as well, Roxana, by the whole neurological component. We, as lay people, we don't understand, but there is a chemical aspect to losing somebody. And that's the neurotransmitters and the hormones that flood the body. And they make us feel all kinds of different things. So all those neurological changes in the brain are going to affect emotion regulation. They're going to affect memory. They're going to affect our multitasking ability and our organizational skills and even our learning capacity.
Yeah, and our capacity to memorize as well and to be organized.
Exactly. So we don't realize it, but all of these things that we're feeling, we start to think, oh my God, I'm not coping. I don't know how to do anything. This is what we tend to call brain fog. And it's because of that rush of neurochemicals and hormones. And it gives you a mix of different things. Like we were just saying, it will affect our emotion regulation. So we'll get upset easier. We'll get depressed easier. It will give us disturbed sleep or loss of appetite, or for other people, an increased appetite. And for some people, the disturbed sleep might be that they can't sleep. For other people, it might be that they sleep too much. I just couldn't stop sleeping when it hit me. And I have never taken a nap in my life up until that point. Then just suddenly, middle of the day, I couldn't keep my eyes open. So all of these neurochemical transmitters are affecting everything from our focus, stopping us being able to focus, making us to ruminate, to really keep going over the same thoughts over and over and over, giving us confusion, forgetfulness, fatigue. I definitely really felt fatigued. It gives us anxiety and depression, but it doesn't have to give us all of those. Those are just some of the key things, but there's a reason that happens. When we're feeling it, we often, in the motion of it, think, oh my God, I can't cope with this. It's all too much. Why have I got this brain fog? Why am I feeling like this? You're feeling that way because your body is looking after you. Your brain, which is, I always liken the brain to a computer. It's the computer which is looking after the machine, which is the body. And those neurochemicals, neurotransmitters are doing all of these things. They are making you sleepy. They are stopping you from focusing on other things, stopping you from multitasking, stopping you from overeating, because you need time to slow down and digest this.
Yeah, and recover. No, it's like it's a big hit, as you said. No, it's like a wall that hit you. Then you need to go into that process of recovering. And I think one of the things that comes to mind with all what you're saying is this so important message that there is no should do's, should feel, should be, that there is no way that we can go into that mode, because literally this is extremely unique for each of us, each and single of us. Yeah.
Totally unique. And what I would love to share with people who are struggling with grief, and because when we're struggling with it, we often think, I'm not doing this right. I should be over it. I should be doing more. I'm not even grieving right. We beat ourselves up about it, but I want to tell everybody, you are grieving exactly right for you. The way you are feeling it, you're not doing it wrong. It is exactly right. And these feelings are there to help you in this transitional period into where you'll soon become a little stronger and a little more strong, a little more capable. You'll feel a little bit more like going out, a little bit more like communicating with other people. It is giving you that, as you say, that repair time.
Yes.
And that is a gift that the brain is giving your body to make you slow down and allow yourself time to come to terms.
Yes, and it's a process of transformation, no? It's really a transition, and I like to hear the story as well of your grandma, no? That how she started to do other activities. She found in the process of grief, she found other activities that motivate her, gave her purpose very possibly, and make her feel and reconnect with the joy of life. And this is a transition. But in this process as well, because we are in community, no, we are surrounded by others, and very possibly, hopefully, we also will have people, friends, family that will want to do something for us. And there is always some element there in how difficult sometimes is to let them know somehow, no, what could be what you need. And I think in this moment is very important to try to communicate what you need. And you give some thoughts as well in the book about helping others to be good listeners for you in that moment, in how you may need. Sometimes I remember when I was grieving the loss of my dad, just for people to be sitting next to me in silence was more than enough. Yeah. And sometimes we don't know what to do when we want to help a friend that is going through this path. But probably we also have a role in helping them to become good listeners. What is the insight do you have about that?
Yeah, absolutely right. And I found it to be such an important part to put into the book. I think it's one of the areas that we struggle with for so many reasons. And the reason that we need people to listen to us, there's a few reasons. One, again, comes back to what we previously mentioned, that we are tribal. We need to connect with other people. But when we feel loss, we end up alienating ourselves and pulling ourselves away because we feel that nobody understands our pain and our grief. So we start to pull ourselves away at a time that we actually need them. But then on the other hand, we have a lot of people that sometimes are very strong characters, and they might railroad us and say, you need to do this. You should do this. I want you to do this. I'm coming to see you and I want you to come with me and we're going to go for a walk and we're going to do this. And that's too much. And that's then compounded by the fact that so many people really struggle with conflict. And that's a form of conflict when you have to try and say to somebody, no, stop. It's very hard for a lot of people to do. And particularly at a time like this, when you're grieving, you're not strong like you normally would be. And it becomes even harder. So we need to learn how to help people. And that is so critical. Even when we don't feel like we want to talk, like you said, it's so important that maybe we say to people, what I need of you is to listen. So even to those strong characters who are the ones that like to take the lead, they like to say, I know what you need. Trust me, this is for your own good. Sometimes you need to be able to say to them, please stop. I love you. I know you are trying to help me and I appreciate that you are doing so much to help me. But what I need from you right now is, and then you make it up as you go, whatever you need. You might need for them to visit you less often, or don't message me 12 times a day, message me once a day. So we need to get better at being able to help people to know what their role is. One of my very good friends remembers that when she experienced a horrible loss, her fiance passed at a very young age, very shortly before they were due to marry. And I've told her story in the book as well. She remembers somebody that she thought was a very good friend who just did not get in touch with her when she lost her fiance. And she waited and waited and the contact didn't come. And she got to a point where she thought, I'm writing this person off now. They have let me down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, meanwhile, that friend probably just didn't know what to do. And that's often the other thing that people do. Instead of overreacting and pushing things on the grieving person, they withdraw because they don't know what to do. They probably have never experienced grief, or when they did, they wanted everybody to leave them alone.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So they withdraw, and they don't want to cause you more pain, or they don't know how to make it better. So they don't want to make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
So often that's what happens there. And again, they need your help to say, what I need from you is, and that should be on your terms. And it's okay for it to be on your terms. And even when they push back and say, actually, I think you need to come out more often, you can say, no, thank you. I know why you're saying that, but what I need is this. And for people who really feel very conflicted about pushing back to people who really don't like conflict, make a note, write a little note, send them a letter, or write them a little card.
That's a good idea.
And say, I love you. I'm grateful to have you in my life. Thank you for wanting to help me. Here is what help I need from you. And thank you for being able to do this for me.
It's interesting because I didn't understood this until my dad died. This idea of, if you are in pain right now, is because there was something good in that relationship. No? And that's such a difficult concept to understand when you are going through the middle of it all.
That is absolutely right. And it is for exactly what you're saying there, Roxana, that I named the book. So the title of the book is Love Remains, a guide to grief. And all through the book, I am in the exercises as well as in the text that I put into the book, bringing people on this journey to bring them back into the love, the shared connection, the love, because that doesn't ever go away. The person may not be sitting beside you anymore, might not be able to have an out loud conversation with them, but you can still have a conversation. I have conversations with my dad every day. And it's not just
me too.
It's not just talking aimlessly. I can say things. I can say, Dad, this is going on. Oh, what do I do? And I hear what he would say in my head. And it's not the thing I want him to say necessarily, but I know it's what he would say. That person stays with you forever.
Indeed. Yeah.
And the love that you shared is forever.
Yeah, and the felt experience as well. No, the feeling of them is something that remains with you, within your memory, your muscle memory. No, I always remember the warmth of the hugs of my dad. That's something that definitely stayed with me. And one of the things that grabbed my attention as well is that you talk about the monsters of grief. No, we are touching on the very positives, but also there are some elements that can be quite distressing as well. What did you mean with the monsters of grief?
The unseen monsters, these are the components that people don't see in us. They're not so obvious. People know you've lost somebody. That's obvious. But there's a whole load of other things that you experience that are not so obvious. It's like you can't see the organs inside your body. They're invisible. And people only get to see what's on the outside. So very often they only see the exterior of how we are dealing with our grief. But actually, these unseen monsters are the things that only I know about. They're inside here. They're inside here in my head, in my heart. And these are really the very stubborn, the invisible ramifications of my very unique journey of grief. And they include all sorts of components, like this sense of disconnection. I feel disconnected. And that's one of the big things in grief, that we feel so disconnected because we think, I'm feeling these feelings and nobody understands. I remember so much the first Christmas. Dad died in October, and Christmas is fairly close. And Christmas starts early and in a visual way. All the things are out in the shops, the lights go up, the trees go up, cards are out, music, everything is very obvious about Christmas. And Christmas was my dad's favorite time of year. He was a big kid. He loved Christmas. He would have as many trees in the house as he could squeeze in. He would have decorations everywhere. He would be singing Christmas songs from September. It was his time of year. And when I hit that first Christmas, everybody's celebrating, the lights are up, the trees are up, the cards are going out, the songs are playing. And I was thinking, why does nobody know? Why does nobody understand? This is not a time to celebrate. This is intense. And that's alienating, that sense of disconnection from everybody else, because they don't understand your pain.
Yes.
But guess what? Is a sense of losing your identity. And I saw that in my mother. I saw it in part in me, not to the same degree, but from my mum, her husband, her soulmate, her one person that she had chosen in life. You know, she loves and adores her children, my sister and myself, but we're the people that she got. He's the person she chose.
Yeah.
That's vital. So for her, when he's gone, there's that sense of, who am I now? I was a wife. I'm still a wife, but where is he now? He's not here with me. So that disconnection that we talked about leads also to a kind of disconnection of our identity, who we are, what we represent. So I'm no longer a wife with a husband going somewhere now. Then you have so many other monsters of grief that are so unseen. The guilt that we feel. Guilt might have been, did I do enough? I should have been able to stop this. What else could I have done here? Well, look, you did everything that you could at that time.
And that's the thing, because one of the things that comes very often, no, is that when you are in the moment, you are reacting, you are planning, you have to go into that mode, and it depends on how quick all the process of the funeral goes and so on. In Chile, for example, is literally 24 hours. So it's very fast. And in those moments, you need to be making so many important decisions that you will not be able to change, no? And so there is an element there, I think, that we have spoken about before in terms of self-compassion, no? And to take this, because in that way, with love towards ourselves, with patience, I will say, towards oneself, in the sense of understanding that all the decisions you made and all the feelings that you are having is the best you could do at the time with the circumstances as they were.
Absolutely. And it's so important to get to that point and say that and feel that and stick by that, and to not get into the cycle of guilt, because you can't go back and change it anyway.
Yes.
So worrying about the guilt, worrying about the thing that you feel guilt about, isn't going to change anything for you or for them or for anybody.
But we know as well that it will be inevitable, that you very possibly will feel some elements of guilt, no? One of the things that I felt that were super relevant in your book as well are all the amazing activities that you suggest, and how you are talking about things that people could do to go through this process, not to facilitate them going through this process. From these activities, what are your favorites, or what are the ones that you feel you would like to share with us today?
Oh gosh. So yeah, I thought so hard about so many of those. The chapter has at least one, if not two or three, or sometimes four different, if I call them exercises, it makes it sound like something more superficial. These are real techniques that make it unique for you, because your experience of grief is entirely unique. We've talked about that so much. But therefore, how you work through it and the things that you need to do, the things that you need to take on board, they also are unique. So it's not a cookie cutter thing. It can't be handled in the same way for everybody. So to say you need to do this doesn't work.
No.
That's why in it, there are templates that help you to put your content into every single exercise or tip. One of the ones that I loved, though, and we used it very soon after losing Dad, was a memory jar. We created this beautiful little memory jar, and it was just out of a jam jar. Because we didn't have something very beautiful around, but we thought, well, let's just make this beautiful.
Yeah.
And we made this beautiful little jam jar, got these little square notes, and just wrote just little, like a telephone notepad block. And we sat down one evening, my mum, my sister, and myself, around a little coffee table. And we said, we're going to use this memory jar, and we're going to capture on each of these little notes, little memories. All the little things that we loved, all the little things that made us laugh, because my dad was very funny. He had so many tales to tell and so many experiences. So we just set about making little notes, and they were all called the one where. And then we would put in, Dad said this to someone. And you don't even have to write much, because they're your memories, you know what they are. So we put all these little squares, we folded them up into 4, so they're all little small folded pieces of paper, stacked them into the jar, and then every evening we would take a few out and just read them. And in the middle of this intense loss of somebody who was so pivotal in our lives, we were laughing. And it was shocking to us.
When laughter seems inimaginable.
Absolutely, because one of the big things about grieving is that you feel broken, you feel unfixable. And of course, it's not true that you're broken. It's not true that you're unfixable. It just feels like that. And having these happy memories, these funny stories, and just recounting them every now and then is so powerful. So every now and then we will dip into this little jar and just pick a few out, and we'll kind of, like a deck of cards, reorder them in a different order, put them back in again. And then the next time pick another few out and we'll say, oh yes, remember the one where Dad went there and this happened. And to us, it's just our little tiny personal stories. There might only be a few words on the little page, but it's all we need because we know the story. And it's uplifting, it's heartwarming, it's so vital in taking us out of the depths of despair into coming back to realizing that, yes, the love does remain. Everything that we shared is always going to stay with us.
Yes.
And it's not that we loved him, it's that we love him. The love is present tense.
Yes.
So the memory jar is brilliant. Another very simple one, and it doesn't even need a template of any kind. This one is just a tip of don't avoid people or tasks, because that alienates us again. It brings us into our shell. The longer we withdraw from something, the harder it is to go back into it. So for example, it's the same kind of situation for people who maybe are off work long-term. Whether it's for ill health, whether it's that they have lost a job and couldn't find it, the longer you are away from it, the harder it is to get back into it. And you feel people are looking at you, people are talking about you, people are questioning you. You don't have the confidence, you don't have the skills, you don't know how to do it anymore. The longer you stay away from something, the harder it is to rejoin your tribe. So don't avoid things, even though you don't feel like doing them. Show up. Doesn't mean you have to go to parties.
Or be the soul of a party either.
You don't have to, you can go to the party and spend 20 minutes.
Exactly.
And go again. But don't turn your life into something where you don't show up anymore.
Yeah, to continue showing up for life.
Exactly.
That sounds so inspirational as well. Exactly. I'm making a note of this because it really sounds like very inspirational. That in whichever way that looks like, that just continue to show up for life.
And that might be showing up for your once a week coffee with somebody. Or it might be showing up by going volunteering, spending an afternoon volunteering for something. That's one of the best things you can ever do when you're feeling low, whether it's from grief. And grief arises in many ways. It's not always, of course, through death, through grieving for a loss of somebody. You might be grieving a relationship that has. You might be grieving your pet passing. You might be grieving losing your job or your career. There are so many different things to grieve, and grief is grief.
Yeah. And I was actually reading this week an article about how we can also go into that place of grief with retirement, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So many people grieve for that, and they don't expect it, but there's this intense loss of purpose.
Yes.
I have no purpose anymore. A lot of parents hit a grieving stage when their children go off to university.
Yes.
This tends to affect more men than women, because a sense of purpose is one of the top 3 core needs for men. And it's the similar kind of feeling when people retire. Unless you have a purpose, unless you know, well, I'm retiring, but now I'm going to do this with my time.
Exactly.
And we need that sense of purpose. So yeah, those are so important. I think another vital thing to do is to focus on what you love about that person. When you feel low, remind yourself of all of the things that you love about them. And it's not that you loved, again, it's that you love. It's present tense. And remind yourself of all of the things that you learned from them. And when you think about the things that you learned from the person that you have lost, don't just stop at, well, I learned this, they taught me this, they explained this, they made me feel this. So what you learned, take it to the next level and say, well, how am I going to spread that further?
Yeah.
The things that I learned from my dad, I consciously look for opportunities to share those out with other people. So the cycle doesn't stop. Nothing has ended. You are fulfilling it still for them by, I've learned this. I have a great opportunity to share that with my daughter, with my son, with my friend, with my group that I'm involved in. Find those opportunities to keep living it. And then also think about the things that you're grateful for. And in the same way, when you think of what you're grateful for about them, and it might be you were grateful for the stories they told. You might have been grateful for the times that they cooked you dinner, the times that you sat quietly together, the times that you went on a holiday. Think of the things that you were grateful for about them and find opportunities, again, to pay that forward, pay that on to other people. And you keep that person with you on that journey, and it takes you from that despair into something that is more practical, but also uplifting, because you're focused on the things that you love about them. You're focused on what you've learned from them, and you're focused on what you're grateful for, but you're starting to take action instead of wallowing. And wallowing sounds like I'm saying it's bad. It's not bad. It's what we feel like when we are in that grief.
Absolutely. So we're getting to the end of these amazing episodes. Thank you so much, Tracy, for being there.
My pleasure.
I'm thinking about so many moments in my own processes of grief in life, and I'm sure many in our audience will be, recalling, and there will be a lot of memories for them. Either they are in the process of grief or have passed that place. But I will definitely recommend everybody to read your book, Love Remains, A Guide Through Grief, and hopefully they will find more inspiration there to continue in this process that we know is painful, but also it is a moment in life, that sometimes take us into a huge new level of experiencing life as well, and finding our own identity and purpose. I think you will join me, Tracy, in reminding everybody that is listening to, as you said, don't suffer alone. Yes. And if you don't, for some reason, want to connect with friends or family, do think about finding institutions. There are so many good places where with helplines as well that you can access and have conversations sometimes that you need to be with someone neutral. that you will feel more comfortable talking about. So to allow yourself that space of finding as well that helpline that can be available where you are, in whatever country you are, in whichever city you are, but also to consider therapy. I always encourage people to consider therapy as a place of neutrality and safety to process what is going on for them.
You're so right. And it plays a vital role, because very often we don't like to offload and put pressure on other people that we love and care for.
Mm-hmm.
So going to a therapist who is skilled and experienced means that you have an outlet, and you have somebody, as you say, who is neutral, that can help you. You're not going to be judged. You're going to be able to experience something in a different way that helps you to work through your grief. Absolutely. But something else that people could consider is, even if you are not the one who has experienced grief, but know somebody who has or is, and you don't know how to help them, you can give them the gift by perhaps you researching how to help them. So there's a number of people I know who have, for example, read the book and said they found it incredible ways to help somebody that they love, because that person is not yet in a stage where they want to read a book.
Exactly. Yes.
So this just gives you some ways of helping somebody that you care about, rather than overkill by talking too much at them and making them do what you think is right, or withdrawing. So find out how you can help somebody who is grieving.
Yeah.
Just wait for this to be about your grief.
Absolutely. I love that message, because this can also be a tool for those that are wanting to be that person of support. And what a better way than educating yourself, finding information for yourself to be that good listener that your friend will need, or member of your family will be in need, and to be open to also ask them, what can I do for you? What is that you need now from me? No, and take it from there.
Is asking instead of telling them what they need.
Yes. Wonderful. So thank you so much. I really feel inspired by this conversation, Tracy. And yeah, thank you for this magnificent conversation. I'm sure we'll cross paths soon, and I'm looking forward for that.
Thank you. Me too. Thank you so much for having me with you today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.